very unfair. I'd like to be in these various states where I should be campaigning like anybody else. This is a Biden trial. This all comes out of the White House and the Department of Justice. This is all them. In fact, a lead person from the DOJ is running the trial. So Biden's office is running this trial. This trial is a scam, and it's a sham, and it shouldn't happen.
Donald Trump coming out swinging yet again today there in New York City, as we again see, in my estimation, what will eventually be interpreted as full-on election interference. You know, he thinks so. Going down. Unbelievable. We just learned through new media reports that the third in charge over at the DOJ actually left the DOJ and went to work in Alvin Bragg's office. So that's what Donald Trump is referencing right there. Like, how is that fair? Why do they have such a vendetta? Oh, we know why. We know why. You know what? It is all politics. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Trish Regan. Special live edition of the Trish Regan Show for you here today as we get new evidence that really does not paint Michael Cohen, the key witness in this whole entire saga, in a very good light. Michael Cohen, we know, has lied before. Why is a jury to believe that he's not lying now? You need to hear from Michael Cohen's former lawyer. I mean, this is bizarre. The former lawyer out testifying against him, saying he has to do this. So he was there on Capitol Hill speaking with Florida's very own Greg Steube. Let's listen in and hear this whopper.
Through further cross-examination, Cohen told me that he knew there was money missing from the Trump inauguration.
Yes. I see where you are now. Thank you.
Okay, and then on the next page, into that first paragraph, Cohen decided that while he didn't believe the allegation of the Stormy Daniels story, that he thought the story would be embarrassing for Trump and especially for Melania, so he decided he would take care of it himself.
Absolutely, and that is contrary to what this guy testified to in court in New York yesterday.
Well, and what's not being talked about is your next paragraph, like the reason and his motivation for that. So if you could just kind of walk through that for the committee.
Yeah, obviously, when we started to talk about the NDAs, and this is the very first meeting at the Regency Hotel, when, by the way, Rudy Giuliani was not involved in representing Donald Trump at that time. Cohen testified that it was a conspiracy between Giuliani and Costello as of this date. Totally false. In any event, he also said that he didn't discuss the Stormy Daniels matter with us, and he certainly did. I specifically asked him because he kept on going back saying, I can't believe they're trying to put me in jail for these NDAs. So I said, Michael, tell me about the NDA. Tell me about Stormy Daniels. What did you do? He said, I got a call from a lawyer representing Stormy Daniels who represented that she was going to testify that Donald Trump had sex with Stormy Daniels. Michael Cohen said, I didn't believe the allegation, but I knew that such an allegation would be terribly embarrassing. He said it would be embarrassing. He focused on Melania Trump. He said, I didn't want to embarrass Melania Trump. He said, that's why I decided to take care of this on my own. Right. I went back to that several times. You did this on your own? On my own. Did Donald Trump have anything to do with it? No. Did you get the money from Donald Trump? No. From any of his organizations? No. From anybody connected to Donald Trump? No. Where did you get the money? I took out a HELOC loan against my property. I said, why would you do that? He said, I didn't want anybody to know where I got this money. I didn't want Melania to know. I didn't want my own wife to know because she's in charge, he said, of the Cohen family finances. He said, if she saw money coming out of my account, she'd ask me 100 questions, and I didn't want to answer any of them. It was clear after talking to him for several days after that, whenever we talked on the phone or in my office, that he kept on bringing up the subject that he felt he was betrayed by not being brought down to Washington, D.C. This guy thought, he said to me, that he should have been Attorney General of the United States, or at least the chief assistant to the president. Ludicrous, but that's what he thought. And he was very angry about that. He wanted to do something to put himself back into the inner circle of Donald Trump. That's why he took care of this on his own. There had to be a motivation. Michael Cohen is always working for things that benefit himself. And that's what he was doing here. That's completely different to what he said that he told the grand jury. That's completely different to what he's testifying to in New York. Nobody has heard this side of the equation.
Right.
Okay, guys, this is actually pretty important. I mean, it gels exactly with that secret recording that I played for you just the other day, the one in which Michael Cohen's talking about how they're going to finance this whole thing, right? To make these stories go away. And Trump's like, what, financing? What do you mean? What are you talking about? Right? And now you have the former lawyer for Michael Cohen. I mean, that's just bizarre in and of itself. How often do you see an attorney testifying against a former client like that now coming out and basically solidifying everything that we heard in the tape the other day? This is not a good set of facts. I mean, they have based their entire case. By the way, it's not really clear whether any of this is illegal to begin with. And this is your economics girl talking about this, okay? Like, I'm not a legal expert, but this is pretty darn obvious stuff. No wonder Alvin Bragg didn't want to bring the case initially. I used to think that Letitia James had the weakest case of all, but now I'm looking at this and going, oh my gosh, I suspected this is, in fact, I mean, it's like, which one? Right? You can toss a coin. Which is the weakest? They're all going to get, this one's going to wind up getting thrown out. I would bet that they're just going to say there's nothing here. There's no crime. There's, she signed an NDA. Okay, so what? And Michael Cohen apparently took it upon himself to finance the thing. That's what we're learning. So the lawyer, former lawyer for Michael Cohen, he doubled down on all this. He just went on to Fox this morning and started talking about it some more. I got to play this for you because he's basically telling us that Cohen's bad news, that this is what happened. And for Alvin Bragg and the DAs to suggest otherwise is just actually false, which leads us back to what? Election interference. Anyway, let's hear from Bob Costello again.
The rest of the proof doesn't support Michael Cohen. And by the way, one thing that you're not reporting yet is that besides making that statement, I swear to God, I don't have anything on Donald Trump, he also said more times than that answer, guys, I want you to understand, I will do whatever the F I have to do. I will never spend a day in jail. And then he'd slam his hand on the conference room table. Now, what does that mean to you? That means this guy is saying, I will lie, cheat, steal, do whatever I have to do. I'm not going to jail. Well, he did go to jail. And who do you think he blames for that? Mm-hmm. And why do you think he names his most recent book, Revenge? I mean, quite frankly, he's using this to monetize himself. Because this is the only way this guy can make money right now. Selling books and T-shirts and trinkets and being the ultimate anti-Trumper. And because he was doing that on TV, and I saw that, I said, I can't sit by and let this guy tell the grand jury, tell the jurors now this false story when he told us the opposite story at a moment when he was desperately seeking a way out and was willing to kill himself. And certainly cooperating with truthful information is a lot easier. But he didn't have any truthful information.
Okay, so this is a really explosive indictment, if you would, of Michael Cohen, and I think it's going to make it harder and harder for the jury to come to some kind of conclusion. I mean, in other words, there's got to be no reasonable doubt that anything innocent happened, right? Like, can you actually accuse Trump of being guilty of this crime, whether or not it's a crime? I mean, that's why I think it's ultimately going to get thrown out. But I don't think there's any there. Not enough. I mean, unless you get some wild jury, and I know we've talked about that. I mean, I look at your comments and you guys are like, be careful, because you know what, this jury could be so biased. But I think there's a lot of holes in this one. And the more holes you have, the more problematic. I mean, not to mention the bias, of course, right? We've talked about that. Donald Trump's not allowed to talk about that anymore because he's got a gag order on him. But the judge in this case should have recused himself. Number one, should have recused himself. You've got a judge who has a daughter who makes her living by servicing the political campaigns of key Democrats, including the likes of Adam Schiff Show. You remember him, right? Star of the Schiff Show, the total circus clown. So you get Adam Schiff and even Kamala. Apparently the Biden campaign had some campaigns that went through her social media company. According to the New York Post, there's some $93 million that she's raised through this social media company. And let's not forget, like, she takes a cut of it, right? Like, that's how she's making her living here. Democrats have raised some $93 million. And when they raise all that money, guys, it's Democrat money. And they're using these cases, these various 4 cases, these 91 indictments, to help raise the money. In other words, every time there's a new wrinkle in one of these cases, they use that as an opportunity. And so it's just rather unseemly. Well, even more unseemly is what we learned today. Representative Dan Goldman, who's like the biggest Biden lackey ever, carrying Hunter's water even for him, Hunter and Joe Biden's water. Representative Goldman from New York was on MSNBC the other day, and we were talking about this. Some of you mentioned in the comments, this was kind of a weird thing that he said, right? I'll play it for you. He mentioned somehow that he had been training Michael Cohen, and we're all like, well, what do you mean you're training Michael Cohen? I mean, you're training Michael Cohen? Come on. Like, now they're training the witnesses. Well, it turns out he actually also raised money through Laura Mershon's company, which, you know, look, she's welcome to earn her living however she wants, right? And she should. And it's a free country, and we're a capitalist country, and there's money in politics. I don't love it, but it is what it is, right? Like, she's out there earning a living. Why didn't her dad just turn down the case? Because who needs the headache, right? Who needs it? Let it go to somebody whose daughter is not involved in this. Anyway, Dan Goldman, he mentioned this little whopper. Here we go.
Because the DA knows that they are going to have to corroborate him because he is an admitted perjurer. He is an admitted liar. He has testified inconsistently on the stand, so he's either lying one time or the other, and he will be really skewered on cross-examination for that. So in order to use him effectively, they are going to rely heavily on that recording, where he's very much corroborated about what he says about Karen McDougal, and they're going to rely very much on the consistent statements that he made with all of the other witnesses. It remains to be seen today on cross-examination whether he can hold up and accept responsibility for lying on the stand before or lying to Congress. And he will say, of course, yes, I lied, and I did that for Donald Trump, your client, and that'll be effective. The technical defenses or the technical aspects of the case do remain to be seen.
Yeah. So Dan Goldman was training Michael Cohen, and he admitted this on MSNBC, and it's a little bit weird. It's come out now that this actually could be kind of a problem. And there's a representative from Wyoming in the House of Representatives who brought this up today, just moments ago. I want you to hear what she had to say about it, and then Jim Jordan's reaction, how the woman on the left is going nuts. No, you're going to strike it from the record. Strike it. It's not relevant. I'm like, I think it is kind of relevant. I mean, it really is a little bit relevant. You're seeing how incestuous all of this is, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to Capitol Hill.
Like there might be a dog in this hunt on the other side. What you need to understand is that Mr. Goldman, the novice representative from New York, actually does have a personal stake in this case. He has stated that he has been involved with the Bragg case, helping to prepare Mr. Cohen for his testimony. So he is quite closely aligned with an admitted and convicted liar and perjurer. He's also paid the Judge Merchant's daughter's firm over $150,000 for her services. So I think we've got quite a conflict of interest from Mr. Dan Goldman, the novice representative from New York. And just one other thing to keep in mind when considering the hostility from the folks on the other side of this aisle is that the ranking member of this
Mr. Chair, I would move to have that
was Jeffrey Epstein's
to have
fixer.
that phrase taken down.
The ranking member was Jeffrey Epstein's fixer. So I think that might give you some idea of why you see this hostility.
Hang on, statements be taken down.
So I think she's going after the Jeffrey Epstein part, but no, it's the Dan Goldman part. Listen.
Regarding the conflict of interest related to Mr. Goldman be stricken down from the record. Engaging in personal personalities.
In your 14-minute and 14-second opening statement, you called the former president, current candidate for the office of president of the United States, all kinds of names. I think
he's not a member of this
I understand
committee,
he's not a member,
and
but
that's what I'm asking.
A former president. What I'm saying is we should all be careful about it. I think the gentlelady from Wyoming was just stating facts that are in the news report.
She accused him of a conflict of interest on the committee during the hearing. I ask that that be stricken down.
Gentlelady's point of order is overruled. The gentlelady from
Overruled. She accused him of a conflict of interest. It seems like an accusation that one could actually legitimately make. In other words, again, like the incestuous nature of all of this, it really seems like they're ganging up on him. They're ganging up on Trump. And we've never seen anything quite like this, ladies and gentlemen, ever before. I mean, you see it down in Brazil, right? I mean, Lula went to jail. His vice president went to jail. Now he's president again. What do you know? He's on the left, though, so we don't necessarily want to emulate that. But I would say what we certainly don't want to emulate is the idea that anybody who's in office then is at risk for going to jail after the fact because your political enemies come out of the woodwork. And then the political supporters are there to crush the opponent and to protect whoever is in office at the time. What do you think they're doing right now with Joe Biden? I mean, they are protecting him. They are circling the wagon. Consider the fact that he's not getting tried for his documents. You remember those classified documents? Yeah, the one that, they turned up finding out it was in the garage. Those classified documents. Joe sort of remembers it. Remember?
Mr. President, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, okay. Classified material next to your Corvette. What were you thinking?
Let me, I'm going to get a chance to speak on all this, God willing, soon. But as I said earlier this week, people, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage. Okay? So it's not like you're sitting out in the street. But anyway,
was in a locked garage.
Yes, as well as my Corvette. But as I said earlier this week, people know
he takes classified documents so seriously that, yeah, he leaves them in the locked garage next to the Corvette. Well, this became an issue, of course, because Robert Hur was supposed to move forward with prosecution, ultimately decided he couldn't. He said, you know what, this guy committed a real crime. Let's go back to Robert Hur saying exactly that in his congressional testimony. Listen.
Based on the facts and anticipation of defenses presented in your report, could a reasonable juror have voted to convict?
As I said in the report, some reasonable jurors may have reached the inferences that the government would present in its case in chief at trial.
So a reasonable juror could have voted to convict based on the facts that you presented?
Correct.
In other words, yes, absolutely could have gotten a conviction, but there's a reason they didn't bring charges. I mean, they brought him against Trump. But Robert Hur said he couldn't have really been sure of a conviction because Joe Biden's presenting as old and frail and with a very weak memory. I mean, his memory was strong enough to have gone and gotten those documents, those classified documents, and then to have used them and handed them to a reporter and said, okay, here we go for his multi-million-dollar book. I mean, he profited off of those. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. Profited off of the documents. And yet, because he's so old and frail and nobody actually believes he's capable of remembering anything, well, you can't actually bring these charges against him. So they're protecting him. They're circling the wagons over and over and over again. So logically, now Republicans are saying, and there's one down in Florida, Representative Luna, she's like, I want to hear these tapes. I mean, we should hear these tapes, right? The American public ought to hear what went down in those sessions with Robert Hur that made him think we can't bring this case forward. And yet, no go. No. Yeah. They're nipping that one in the bud as fast as they can over at the White House. They are invoking what's known as executive privilege. New York Times has a story on this. Biden asserts executive privilege in fight over recording of special counsel interview. I mean, that special counsel interview, it must be so bad. It's so bad. They can't possibly have that come out because guess what? That'll really sink the deal for the election. It'll really sink it. I mean, you already see the poll numbers. He's sinking fast, even with groups that he ought to be doing better with. You think about blacks and Hispanics, demographic groups that the left used to be able to count on. but they can't count on him anymore. In fact, new poll out this week shows that 5 out of 6 swing states have Biden suffering. He's falling behind. Trump is way ahead. In some of those swing states, especially down the Sun Belt, he's way, way ahead. He's way ahead because people know that there's something funny going on. Even MSNBC is forced to admit this one. Brand new sound I want to share with you today of this MSNBC reporter who decided to go down to Georgia and, oh, gosh forbid, actually talk to some Republicans. Actually talk to some people that like Trump, that want to see Trump in office. Imagine MSNBC really going out far on the risk curve, talking to some Republicans, talking to some Trump supporters. This reporter went down to Georgia, talked to a very diverse group there, and found out that this whole case is backfiring spectacularly. And so in a swing state like Georgia, where he basically could be at risk of losing to Biden, what has this case done? It has propelled him higher and higher. Not just this case. I mean, you got Fulton County going on. You got Letitia James going on. You got 4 different cases. Jack Smith going on. All of this is contributing to people feeling more positive about the former president of the United States. It's helping him in the polls. It makes all the sense in the world, but let's let these voters explain it.
Has this trial changed your opinion, even caused you to waver or question that at all?
No, it's actually caused me to support him more. I just don't believe there's a coincidence that we have a trial happening in Atlanta. We have one happening in New York. So the question people are beginning to ask themselves, like I did, is like, why now?
It's pretty much everybody says they're picking on him. You know, people are tired of going after him, and you see it in so many areas. It's really not a big issue in the party. Actually, they're really making everybody mad, and they look at a big bully, and the government is the bully.
This is going to be your first time casting a ballot. What is it for you that drives your support of the former president?
I think always fighting. I mean, he's taken so much just defense from news and everything, but he still hasn't given up. He keeps fighting to do what's right.
I've talked to many people who formerly identified as a Democrat. They have changed their political persuasion to independent, and they are looking forward to voting for Trump. Wow. Because now they find something in common with a political candidate at that level.
When you say they find commonality, what is that commonality?
They have felt persecuted by the system of American injustice. And it's not a stretch for them to think that Trump may be a victim as well. People see that there's some kind of commonality between himself and maybe all the black men that have been incarcerated and the families that have been impacted by black male incarceration.
Isn't that amazing? The boomerang effect, right? It's like, boom, they think that they're going after him, they're going to get him, and they're going to change voters' opinions this way. And all they do, because he is Teflon Don, right? All they do is solidify support for Donald Trump, making it that much easier for him to have a path to 270 and become the next president of the United States. I mean, this is history in the making. We are on the front lines of history right now. Please make sure you subscribe. Please make sure that you like, that you share, that you put a comment. I do actually read all the comments. We're in a live show right now, so I see your comments in real time, and then I go back and I look at them after, so you can put a comment in below. Let me know what you think, because I actually think that what they have succeeded in doing is making sure that he is the next president of the United States. I mean, unless they do something really funny, and we have to talk about that. I brought that up in the show just the other day. I think he's got a pretty good shot at things, which is driving one person kind of crazy. That would be Mitt Romney. You see, Mitt Romney really does not like Donald Trump. You know that. I know that. Everybody knows that. But even Mitt Romney is like, what is Biden doing? I mean, we said it would backfire. Don't ever doubt me, right? You know, you heard it here first. We knew it would backfire. And indeed, it has. Mitt Romney saying, gosh, you know, if he were smart, Biden would have pardoned the guy. Anybody else would have done it. I've been around long enough. Nobody would have allowed this to go forward. And I think about Donald Trump telling me when I asked him, I'm like, why didn't you move forward with any of the Hillary Clinton stuff and the server stuff? And he made it quite clear that, you know what, he didn't want to do that to somebody who was the former wife of a president, who was a presidential candidate, because it wasn't very becoming for the United States of America. In fact, his direct words to me were, you know, look, we're still the United States of America after all. We can't look like we're doing that. Well, they did it to him. They did it to him. And even even Mitt Romney was like, you know what? You guys went too far, and you're probably going to get him straight into the White House because of it. He's rising in popularity because of it. Watch.
He should have fought like crazy to keep this prosecution from going forward. It was a win-win for Donald Trump. If Donald Trump is exonerated...
Is that Joe Biden's job, or is that shouldn't there be a separation?
I've been around for a while. If LBJ had been president and he didn't want something like this to happen, he'd have been all over that prosecutor saying, you better not bring that forward or I'm going to drive you out of office.
But I'm pretty sure you support having separate but equal branches of government.
I do, but I also, let me tell you, I mean, you may disagree with this, but had I been President Biden, when the Justice Department brought in indictments, I would have immediately pardoned him.
Interesting. And he goes on to say, I would have immediately pardoned him for the sake of the country, right? Because what you've ultimately done is created a victim. And so the whole soundbite actually has Romney going on to say, you have created this victim, you've kind of created this martyr, and thus people are identifying with him. It's really kind of fascinating because he's probably the first candidate to punch back, right? You know, they punch at him and he's not willing to stay down. He's not willing to stay down, and there's something truly admirable about that. You mean, think about Romney. He had more money than Romney. Romney was so ashamed of his wealth. So ashamed of his wealth. I mean, he let the media get him over and over and over again on that. And Donald Trump's like, heck yeah, I'm wealthy, and I'm damn proud of this wealth. You know what? And Americans respect that. Americans like that. He's honest about it. He's transparent. He's authentic. It's like we've never had that authenticity before. I mean, you go wealthy Romney, who, by the way, should have worn it on his sleeve with pride because he's created hundreds of thousands of jobs. He's created mega companies. I mean, I believe the guy behind Home Depot, that was his private equity shop, right? Bain Capital. They've created all kinds of businesses. Maybe it was Lowe's. We'll check that out and get back to you tomorrow. But in other words, tremendous. Staples, I think, was in there too. He's created these companies. And then he's like afraid to admit it. Whereas Donald Trump is like, oh yeah, I did that and I created that. I mean, like just owns it. And Americans like and respect that. And so I think they trust him more. They trust him more, right? I mean, this is the guy that dared to say the unthinkable. Let's go back to May of 2020. And there was all this chatter that maybe the Wuhan virus, forgive me, the coronavirus could have come out of the Wuhan lab. Kind of making the connection there. And this was no-go territory. You weren't allowed to talk about it. No. I had heard intelligence, by the way, as far back as February of 2020, that was exactly the case. Now, this was not being reported. The intelligence I had was that it was not actually deliberate, but it was a mistake. And it was obviously a pretty awful, awful thing to have had happen. So finally, a reporter asked Donald Trump about it in May of 2020. And he said, yep, I've heard that intelligence, right? Like that it could have. And all of a sudden, people, including Fauci, went bonkers, crazy. How dare he? How dare he? How dare he? But I think the American public respects him for that honesty and that transparency. And it's a game changer because we haven't had it. Let's face it, folks, in politics. So you look at these polls, one after another, they keep coming in, showing us Donald Trump is likely going to win the presidency. I mean, unless they pull some real trick. And look, they got hat tricks galore, right? They can pull all kinds of things. It's really important. There's a story out today saying that the Trump campaign is anticipating this and they're really, really aggressively trying to get ahead of any legal obstacles that they might have. Good, because you need free and fair elections, et cetera. And everybody has to believe in them and have faith in them, et cetera. That's why that Fulton County thing was a big deal the other day. I told you about how they miscounted. It was a mistake and they counted 3,000 votes twice, and now there's going to be an overseer there in Fulton County to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen. So the Trump campaign needs to really and truly be all over that kind of stuff. It's critical. But, you know, assuming that everything's on the up and up, if these polls hold true, remember, he does not poll well. So you're actually looking at possibly a scenario where he does even better than what we're seeing right now. So Biden's freaking out. I mean, like, you want to talk about stress at the White House? That cannot be a very good place to work these days. Not at all. And Biden, I've been told from sources, can be kind of ornery. And, you know, he's always been kind of ornery. So just imagine how ornery he is right now as he gets up there in age. He's really ornery. So he's really angry. And finally, somehow he decides he's going to take that offer of Trump to do a debate. And I'm just going to say, Trump has to be really, really careful, right? Because nothing is done without full calculation of something. I do think Donald Trump can perform tremendously in a debate. We're going to talk about all the things that he has to do in order to really manage this situation, because Biden is old and frail. And just like you can't go after Hillary Clinton with everything you got, even though you want to, she's a woman, you kind of have to respect, all right, she's a woman, she's a mother, she's a grandmother. In this case, we do have to pull like a Robert Hur, who wasn't willing to prosecute Biden because he's so old and frail and no jury would ever believe anything. Donald Trump just has to be himself and not too vicious and not too angry and somewhat careful around this fragile old man. So he's going to do the debate. It's happening in Atlanta, June 27th on CNN. I knew there was a reason. I knew that Jake Tapper, I told you about a month ago that he was softening on Donald Trump. And I was like, I wonder what that's about. Well, now we know. Now we know. CNN has got the debate. Jake Tapper's going to do it. You know, there's a method to the madness. I want you to see the little clip that Biden released. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so weird. I mean, nobody talks this way. It's like he's out of some old Western film or something and think it was a duel by the way he's talking here. Watch him accepting the debate challenge.
Donald Trump lost 2 debates to me in 2020. And since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal. I'll even do it twice. So let's pick the dates, Donald. I hear you're free on Wednesdays.
Make my day, pal. Really? Biden, you're showing your age. You're showing your age, buddy. And then the little quip about, I hear you're free on Wednesdays, right? The one day when he doesn't have to actually be in New York listening to Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels and all this. I mean, this is petty and beneath him. But this is the sort of track he's on, right? He doesn't mind going low, 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 low. Look at what he said about the plane. Drew, did we have that little tweet he put out about the plane? Because he said, yes, I've accepted this offer. I have accepted this offer of a debate challenge. Here, I'll quote. I also received an invitation to debate hosted by ABC on Tuesday, September 10th. Trump says he'll arrange his own transportation. I'll bring my plane too. I plan on keeping it for another 4 years. Ha 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 ha. You know he didn't write that, by the way. He doesn't write any of his. KJP, all right, we're going to hand it to you for that one. She's been discovered to have written a few of them along the way, although that one had a little bit more humor in it than I think she's capable of. Listen, guys, I just want to give a shout out to our friends over at Americans for Prosperity, because they are hoping and praying that we do not see the policies that we have seen for the last 3+ years in effect come next year. In other words, we need some changes here. And these guys are actively working all across the country to identify up-and-comers that can succeed in Washington. We need to take not just the Oval Office, but we need the House, we need the Senate, and we need the right policy for healthcare, for our economy, for energy, for our border, internationally. And AFP is devoted to this. So go check them out at americansforprosperity.org. You can also go to prosperityispossible.org. Imagine that. We could actually have prosperity. We don't need to be dealing with 1.6% lousy economic growth and major inflation anymore. Not if you have the right policies. americansforprosperity.org. All right. So Biden is agreeing now to a debate. Here's how Trump's going to win that. Trump's going to win that by focusing on the issues that matter the most. Pocketbook issues. Everybody knows how much more expensive everything is. Joe Biden's going to sit there and try and tell you that he inherited 9% inflation from Donald Trump. That's not true. He said it like twice in the last few days. I mean, he's just making stuff up. I know he's old and everything, but this is getting to be too much. And guess what? In this day and age, we got tape and recordings of everything, Joey. You know what? You can't get away with that. And neither can KJP. She was called out on this allegation that somehow he inherited 9% inflation. No, he inherited 1.4%. Watch her response.
I'm going to ask you about how the president talks about inflation. So 2 times over the past 2 weeks, the president said inflation was 9% when he came into office. Is the president misleading Americans on that, or does it just not realize that inflation was 1.4%?
So, you know, and thank you for the question, because I know that we got a lot of incoming on this yesterday. And look, what the president was, the point that he was making is that the factors that caused inflation was in place when he walked into the administration, when he took office. As you know, the pandemic caused inflation around the world to be by disrupting our economy and breaking our supply chains. As you know, we had to act quickly on dealing with the supply chain. He put together a task force. You saw the president do that.
Yeah. And you sat there and said it was transitory inflation over and over and over again. The supply chains would be fixed. And I told you, and some others like Larry Summers, who's pretty smart, former head of the National Council of Economic Advisors under Joe Biden, former Treasury Secretary under Clinton, former head of Harvard University back in the day when Harvard was Harvard. You know, I beat him to it, but he eventually came around too and said that, listen, this is going to be bad. Like, you have too much money printing. And that's what Joe did. He came in and he offered a 3rd stimulus check. I mean, I was questioning Trump's 2nd stimulus check. You can't put that much money into the economy, not when the Federal Reserve is doing its thing too. Well, what did they do? They printed, and they caused the inflation that you are now dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. That 9%, that happened under Joe Biden. 1.4% was what we were looking at, but Joe was irresponsible. He kept that money spigot open. He gave you a 3rd stimulus check, and then he went forward with Chuck Schumer, and they passed more spending. The economy can't handle that on top of the Federal Reserve. It's pathetic. It's why, you know what? The one thing that's holding up, I'm telling you, diversify. It's gold. Gold hitting new highs. And you know what? It makes all the sense in the world, because when you're dealing with that much inflation, how do you make sure that your dollars are still worth something? Gold is one of the ways that you can do this. Now, I'm not your financial advisor, but I can tell you in my own personal life, I do invest in gold, and I'm happy I do. I mean, the market's doing great today, but you know what? There's days when it's not doing great, and that's when you really want the gold. The other reason you actually want gold, even in an environment where the market moves higher, is because this is one way that I think you can help preserve the value of your portfolio, preserve the value of your dollars. If you're interested in investing in gold or silver, which, by the way, silver is one of those things that does mimic gold a bit, and I think because of its lower price point is easier to access for some people. Go over to, well, I'm going to give you a new URL. Drew, you don't even know about this. These are our friends at American Heart for Gold. How do you like this, guys? Trish Loves Gold. You can remember that, right? TrishLovesGold.com. Or you can text them. I think we have, there we go. Okay. By the way, this is a great deal. You can actually get up to $15,000 worth of free silver. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Up to $15,000 in free silver if you buy with them. Go call 1-844-495-1115 if you use my name. So if you use my name, Trish, special deal for the viewers on this show, because you know how much I like gold. Just go to TrishLovesGold.com or text Trish, Trish, to 65532 to get up to $15,000 of free silver. Again, Trish to 65532. Really amazing company. I can't wait. I think either tomorrow or Monday, we do have the president of the company, Max Baker, on this show, and he's going to talk to us a lot about central banks and why central banks are buying gold right now. I can wonk out on this stuff like nobody's business. 2 things, opera and gold. So go to TrishLovesGold.com. Anyway, this inflation is incredible. KJP doesn't understand it, doesn't believe it. We got a market today, though, that's doing really, really well. Take a look at this, and I'll tell you why. Because we got an inflation report that was a little bit surprising yesterday, but not so surprising. We got something called Consumer Price Index. Consumer Price Index showed that prices aren't going up as much as people thought. But you see, the day before, we got the Producer Price Index. That's wholesale prices. And typically, it is my experience that wholesale prices go up first, and then eventually they trickle into consumer prices. If the consumer can pay it, then the person who's making the good or the widget will charge it, right? So if you have a local restaurant and they're paying that much more for eggs, which they are, eventually that cost gets hit to the consumer level, right? Menu prices go up. And so there's a lag indicator. So I'm not like necessarily buying this. And I also think, even in best case scenario, if the Fed were saying, okay, well, we think inflation is under control, I think they're wrong. I think they're wrong. I don't think inflation is under control. I don't think they should be believing the best case scenario. And I think it's going to be problematic for whoever is president next time around as well. I mean, and I'm not alone in this. My friend Kevin O'Leary, you know him from Shark Tank, he said exactly this just the other day. I want you to take a listen.
It guarantees that, in my opinion, the Fed will not will not lower rates at all for the rest of this year. And that's not what you want if you're the incumbent. Politically, it looks like this happened because inflation data, you can be 20/20 in terms of looking backwards. We poured a lot of money in the economy during the pandemic. That turned out to be the right thing to do to avoid a depression. But then we kept going. We probably put around $2 trillion too much in. Inflation Reduction Act did not reduce inflation. In fact, it's inflationary, as you can see by these numbers. This is a nasty report.
Yeah. Okay. So in other words, we still have a lot of inflation out there. And if the Federal Reserve decides to cut interest rates like they want to do, then you're going to get more inflation, guys. More and more inflation. Listen, it's really hard to invest in this environment. It's one of the reasons why, because I get asked this question all the time. What do I buy? What do I buy? I mean, you know that, obviously I like gold, but that's just one part of a diversified portfolio. And so I encourage you to go to 76 Research, 76research.com. Go there today. I started this with my dear friend, longtime friend, Rob Horton, who has had a legendary career on Wall Street, couple of decades. He's a stock picker. I'm very much, macro, and I tend to spot these things and I tend to call these trends. I mean, one of them was AI and what I like to call the metaverse until Facebook took that term meta. But we're going into major changes from a technological perspective. I mean, think of what I'm just doing right here with you right now, right? Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Go to 76research.com. Look at the growth, American Resilience Portfolio. If you're a believer in all the major changes that are coming, if you're concerned about having income in your retirement, you want to go and check out the Income Builder Portfolio. And if you're worried about inflation, which you should be, of course, and you still want to have income in your retirement, then go and look at not just the Income Builder, but also the Inflation Protection Portfolio. We have all of these portfolios there. We have the 76 report for you as well. You can go to 76report.com. You can go to 76research.com. Subscribe. You know what? It's going to be the best $9.99 you ever spent because there's stock picks in there. There's ideas. There's ways for you to think about all of this. In terms of the model portfolios, those are a little more pricey, but you get 10 to 15 stock picks and we tend to be pretty good. I don't want to toot the horn too much, but we know what we're doing. And I've been on the front lines of this, I'll tell you, my entire career from the media perspective. So I see through some of the BS that's out there. And Rob has been on the front lines from an investing perspective, which is a tremendous track record. So go check it out, 76research.com. We're going to leave it there today. I'm going to be back with you tomorrow. We have a whole lot more to get to, and we'll have a little bit more time. I know that I'm here a little early with you. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, make sure you share, leave a comment, and we'll discuss again tomorrow. Big stuff ahead. See you then.